Now let's look at what happens when we want to add another person's budget constraint and indifference curve to this scenario. So let's add George. Let's say George has an income level per week of $90, so a little less than Don. But when George and Don go out to eat, George also likes to consume 6 slices of pizza. So let's start by drawing George's budget constraint. So we always want to start with the budget constraint. So we say, if George spends all his money on Dukes, then he can have $90 divided by that $1 composite price, or 90 units of Dukes. So less than even what Dawn is spending on all of the goods after her consumption. But if George spends all his money on pizza, he can get at most, where do I want to put this? Right about here. $90 divided by that $3 price, or at most 30 slices of pizza. Now we wouldn't see George actually consuming that amount. That's just what they can afford at the extremes. We connect this, and maybe I'm going to call this BCG for George's budget constraint. Maybe we should change this to BCD for Don's budget constraint. And so if George spends his $18 on pizza, then we're just going to say his $90. So $3 price, 6 slices of pizza, plus the $1 price of Dukes. What that leaves George with, when we take the $18 and subtract it from his original $90, George only has $72 left for all other consumption. So maybe I'm going to call this G for George. And obviously, George is also at a point of tangency. So I'm going to call this, we're going to assume that their indifference curves are the same shape. They have the same preferences. And I'm going to call this U George. And, you know, Dawn is definitely on a higher indifference curve. So she's at a higher level of happiness. Maybe I'll move this from A to D. Because she has more composite goods, same amount of pizza, so she's on a higher indifference curve. So if I asked you, you know, who's happier, you would say, well, Don's happier because UD is greater than U George. Let's look in the next video what happens when we add a market shock.